Okay, so I want to thank everyone for joining us for this presentation on the registration of cosmetic product facilities and product listings, a final guidance overview and interpretation. My name is Ken Stevenson, and I'm the president of Pseudoreg. In this presentation, we will cover statutory requirements for cosmetic product facility registrations and product listings, the definitions used in the guidance for industry, the responsibilities for making the registration and listing submissions, exemption information, cosmetic facility registration and product listing submission information, methods available for the submission of cosmetic facility registration and listing information, contract manufacturing information and quality agreements, the suspension of registration, the importance of conducting and documenting cosmetic product safety substantiations, and the importance of management and control of registration, labeling, and cosmetic product listing information. For statutory requirements, on December 29th of 2022, the President signed the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2023 into law. This included the Modernization of Cosmetics Regulation Act of 2022, or MoCRA, as an amendment to the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, or the FDA Act. Section 607 of MoCRA, and now the FDA Act, establishes requirements for cosmetic product facility registration and cosmetic product listing. For the definitions, they come straight from the guidance for industry, and this guidance was distributed in December of 2023. First, we have contract manufacturer, which means a facility that manufactures or processes a cosmetic product on behalf of another entity. Cosmetic product means a preparation of cosmetic ingredients with a qualitatively and quantitatively set composition for use in a finished product. DUNS number is the Data Universal Numbering System number, and that's a unique 9-digit identification number provided by Dun & Bradstreet. Now, Dun & Bradstreet is one of the 3 major business credit bureaus. You can think of the DUNS number kind of like a social security number for your business, but unlike social security numbers, which are used solely in the United States, the DUNS number is issued and used by companies worldwide. Your DUNS number is also linked to your business credit profile, and it can be used by creditors, vendors, and suppliers to check your business credit scores and assess your company's financial health. Also, because of the worldwide prominence of the DUNS number use and assignment, FDA uses it to identify business sites. And the DUNS number is site-specific, meaning that each distinct physical location of an entity, such as branches, divisions, and headquarters, may be assigned a different DUNS number. For the definition of facility, a facility is any establishment, including an establishment of an importer, that manufactures or processes cosmetic products distributed in the United States. However, the definition of facility does not include beauty shops and salons unless that establishment manufactures or processes cosmetic products at that location. Mixing it and using it in the shop is okay, but mixing it and putting it in a final package and then sending it out the door is not okay. The definition of a facility does not include a cosmetic product retailer, including individual sales reps or direct sellers, retail distribution facilities, pharmacies, unless such establishment manufactures or processes cosmetic products that are not sold directly to consumers at that location. The definition of facility does not include hospitals, physicians, offices, and healthcare clinics. The definition of facility does not include public health agencies and other nonprofit entities that provide cosmetic products directly to the consumer. And the definition of facility does not include entities like hotels and airlines that provide complimentary cosmetic products to customers incidental to other services. The definition of facility does not include trade shows and other venues where cosmetic product samples are provided free of charge. And the definition of facility does not include an establishment that manufactures or processes cosmetics that are solely used for research or evaluation, including for production testing and not offered for retail sale. And then the definition of facility doesn't include establishments that solely perform any of the following operations. So that includes labeling, relabeling, packaging, repackaging, holding, or distributing. And for packaging and repackaging, that doesn't include if they're filling a product container with a cosmetic product, because this is actually a part of the manufacturing process. The FEI number is an acronym which stands for the FDA Establishment Identifier. It's also known as the Firm or Facility Establishment Identifier. The FEI number is a unique identifier assigned by the FDA to identify firms associated with FDA-regulated products. FDA intends to use a facility's FEI number as the Cosmetic Product Facility's registration number. Manufacturing or processing of a cosmetic in this guidance means engaging in one or more steps in the making of a cosmetic product by chemical, physical, biological, or any other procedures, including manipulation, sampling, testing, or control procedures applied to the product. An operator is a person who has management authority over an establishment. An owner is a person who has ownership interest in an establishment. And finally, a responsible person is defined as the manufacturer, packer, or distributor of a cosmetic product whose name appears on the label of such cosmetic product. Another way to state this is that the responsible person is often the owner of the brand. We will talk about brand names and product names as they relate to the responsible person in this presentation, though these terms aren't included in the definitions section of the guidance. So who's responsible for making the submissions? Well, as I stated a few slides back, Section 607, part of MoCRA, which is now part of the FD&C Act, requires that every person that owns or operates a facility that engages in the manufacturing or processing of a cosmetic product for distribution in the United States register each facility with the FDA. Now, this doesn't include manufacturers of cosmetic ingredients like isolated ingredients or raw materials that haven't been compounded in a product. FDA only expects non-exempt facilities to register if they manufacture or process the final formulation of cosmetic ingredients, including a final formulation that is a single ingredient final formulation. So that would include something like petrolatum or castor oil. And this includes final formulations that have not yet been packaged. Also required to submit to FDA a cosmetic product listing for each cosmetic product. Now, FDA only expects non-exempt responsible persons to list cosmetic products that are marketed for users, the user being the consumer or a professional use. A single listing submission for a cosmetic product may include multiple cosmetic products with identical formulations or formulations that differ only with respect to color, fragrances, flavors, or quantity of contents. So small businesses are exempt from MoCRA provisions for registration and listing in GMP, but please notice that I put a line through the GMP and I didn't actually remove it completely. According to MoCRA Section 612, a small business is the responsible persons and the owners and operators of facilities engaged in the manufacturing or processing of a cosmetic product for distribution in the United States and with an average gross annual sales in the U.S. of cosmetic products for the previous 3 years of less than $1 million. Such entities are exempt from GMP Section 606 and the registration and listing requirements Section 607. However, there is a Section 606 subsection B titled Considerations. And if you look at the text of the bill, Section 606 subsection B states that in establishing regulations for GMPs, such regulations shall include simplified good manufacturing practices for smaller businesses as appropriate. to ensure that such regulations do not impose undue economic hardships for smaller businesses and may include longer compliance times for smaller businesses. Further, the consideration subsection communicates that while a small cosmetic manufacturer may not necessarily need to implement a GMP quality system to the same scale as a large cosmetic manufacturer, GMPs are not completely off the table for these small businesses. In fact, it's been my experience that consulting with manufacturers of all sizes, GMP processes are likely to be the most simple and effective methods to account for compliance to the applicable provisions of MoCRA. For both Section 606 and 607 of MoCRA, while small businesses may be exempt, there will still be some situations where GMP and registration and listing will need to be verified. One example, in contract manufacturing arrangements, the contract manufacturer may handle products for companies that qualify as small businesses, and those businesses are therefore exempt from Section 606 and 607 under MoCRA, but the CMO itself may not qualify as a small business and would not be exempt. In such situations, the small business will want to ensure that their CMO is under GMP and registered with FDA to manufacture their product. Finally, please be aware that while small businesses may not be required to register and list, and there may be some flexibility in the application of GMPs to such businesses, they will still need to comply, just as any other cosmetic manufacturer, with the remaining provisions of MoCRA, which include adverse event reporting, safety substantiation of the product, labeling, records and documentation, and mandatory recall authority. A facility that registers as a drug or device manufacturer and lists those drugs and/or device products, and those products are also cosmetics, that facility is exempt from the provisions of MoCRA. And to be clear, they are exempt from all the provisions of MoCRA except for the fragrance allergen labeling and the professional use labeling requirements, unless that facility also manufactures or processes cosmetic products that are regulated only as cosmetic products. Another way to say that is if you manufacture products that are classified by regulations as cosmetics only, then you need to register as a cosmetic manufacturer and list those products as cosmetics. Now, there are some entities for which there are no exemptions from MoCRA. No matter the size or gross sales, businesses engaged in the manufacturing or processing of a cosmetic product for distribution in the United States that contacts the mucous membranes of the eye under normal use are injected. And please be aware that I've put pictures of tattoos there because currently in FDA regulations, tattoos are considered to be injected. Tattoo ink is considered to be injected. Stay tuned to the AFTO Body Art Committee because we're currently working with FDA to attempt to see if we can revise that terminology to something that's more in line with what is often used at the state and local government regulation terminology, and those are terms such as inserted or placed. If you manufacture cosmetics that are intended for internal use, like a mouthwash that doesn't have an active ingredient, or if you manufacture cosmetics that are intended to alter appearance for more than 24 hours under normal use and removal by the consumer is not part of such normal use, those facilities must be registered and all of the cosmetics that are being manufactured and processed at that facility have to be listed. And there are no exemptions to any of the provisions of MoCRA. In other words, you must comply with MoCRA. So what information is included in the facility registration submission? Well, it's pretty straightforward. The name of the owner and operator, the facility name, the physical address, the email, telephone for contact, info for a U.S. agent if you're a foreign facility, the FEI number there, brand names, product categories, responsible person, the type of submission, optional information. I'm going to point out a few things here. The FEI number that we've mentioned previously in the definition section is to be included, and if you don't have one, the owner or operator of the facility will need to obtain an FEI number before submitting the facility registration. The FEI can be requested via the FEI portal, and issuance from FDA typically takes 7 to 10 days. The registration process, you will need to include all the brand names under which cosmetic product manufactured or processed in the facility are sold, and be aware that this info is not going to be disclosed to the public. The brand name is the distinguishing name used by the company to identify a commercial product on the product label, and the brand name may be proprietary and or a registered trademark. The product name also has to be included in the registration submission and is generally considered the statement of identity and provides information about the type or kind of cosmetic product in the package to help the consumer understand the functional use of the product. These will also not be disclosed to the public. The brand name and the product name are not the same. You'll also have to select product categories. So in the registration process and within the appendix of the guidance, there are 17 main cosmetic product categories, and then within the main product categories, there are approximately 135 subcategories or qualifiers to include. There's a lot of cosmetics out there. The registrant is to select all that apply, and even with all those categories and subcategories, there's going to be some instances where the exact category of the cosmetic product is not going to be able to be identified. So in those instances, you will select product category number 17, which is other cosmetic preparations or other preparations. You will also have to include the responsible person. The responsible person for each cosmetic product manufactured or processed at the facility is going to be often, but not always, the brand name plus the LLC suffix or INC for incorporated suffix. Not always, but a lot of times. And then you also have to select the type of submission. And we'll get into more about what's in each type of submission. But just for now, the types of submission are initial, an update to the content, and then renewal. I want to also point out that FDA intends to make as much of this information as allowed by the extent permitted by the law available to the public, okay? But some of it already is not allowed. Some of the proprietary information is not allowed. And I want to also point out that FDA requests that individuals submitting registration and listing information attest to the accuracy and veracity of the information submitted under penalty of federal law. So the facility registration submission types and when they make each submission, you're going to have your initial registration. And right now, firms, the cosmetic manufacturing firms are registering as we speak. The system, we completed the testing at the end of the year last year, and the system literally went right online after that. So folks, if you need to register, you can already start registering now. I will make you aware that the FDA issued a compliance policy for registration in cosmetic product listing, that basically made the deadline for all of this July 1st, 2024. They issued that last year on November 8th, 2023. So for registration, you have until July 1st, 2024. That's your deadline for the initial registration. And then after the initial registration, you're going to have an amended registration. And the amended registration is for making changes to the registration information, which you would have to do within 60 days of anything changing in the information. So, for instance, if you're a contract manufacturing organization and you get a new client and you're now manufacturing for a new brand name or a new responsible person, you need to update your registration information within 60 days of that starting. This also includes any changes that result in cancellation of the registration or deregistration. And then you have another type of submission, which is the renewal of registration. You have to renew your registration for cosmetics biennially, which is every 2 years. And FDA is providing for an abbreviated renewal to confirm no changes. So you'll have an abbreviated or shorter process. I just want to reiterate that the amended registration includes if you have to deregister. A lot of times facilities will think that if they are no longer manufacturing, they can just let their information lapse in the FDA system. And please understand that allowing your information to lapse is not the same thing as fulfilling your statutory obligation to deregister your facility. So put it on your calendar, and please remember that registration is not a one and done thing. FDA expects you to keep this information up to date and accurate. So what information is included in the product listing submission? Well, the facility registration number of each facility where the cosmetic product is manufactured or processed, and this information isn't going to be disclosed to the public. That's the first piece. Then you have the contact of the responsible person, and you're going to have the product name. And you're going to have the cosmetic product categories, and you're going to have the list of ingredients. You got to include there any fragrances, flavors, or colors. You're going to have a product listing number if any has previously been assigned, and please be aware that if it hasn't been assigned, then the first time that you list, FDA will assign one for each product. Then you have your types of submissions. It's very similar as for registration processes. You're going to have initial, update, and abbreviated renewals. Then you've got some optional information. The parent company, the type of business, the image of the label, the product webpage, the professional, whether or not the product is professional use, your DUNS number, unis, additional contact information. I do want to point out, I thought it was interesting that an image of the label is an optional piece of information to go in. I think that eventually that's probably going to change and it won't be optional, but I don't know for sure. It just struck me as curious because in every other type of product register or product listing operation, product listing type of deal with FDA, you typically will include a JPEG of the actual label of the product. So I thought it was interesting that with cosmetics, they're optional here. And then unis, if you're familiar with the FDA substance registration system, a uni is assigned to a unique molecular entity. A uni, it stands for unique ingredient identifier, and you have a preferred substance name, FDA preferred substance name, along with alphanumeric code that is considered the unique ingredient identifier, and it's used for electronic submissions and registration purposes so that you can identify the unique molecular entity or substance that you're dealing with, and that'll go along with your list of ingredients. But again, this is optional information. You can add additional contact info that can go along, and that's for anyone that is associated with the actual listing submission. And then once again, FDA requests that individuals submitting registration listing information attest to the accuracy and veracity of the information submitted under penalty of federal law. So the product listing submission types and when to make each submission. Again, we've got the initial listing coming up, and it's already happening right now. The firms are listing products right now because after the compliance policy, same compliance policy from November 8, 2023 last year, FDA stated that they will be enforcing the product listing requirements on July 1st, 2024. So that's your registration and listing, your initial registration and listing deadline, July 1st, 2024. And then the other types of product listing submissions and when to make each submission. You've got your update to listing content, which is for making changes to product listing information. You have a requirement to update it annually. And then that also includes any product discontinuations or delistings. You've got a renewal of listings. You have to renew them or update them, the product listings annually. And FDA is providing, again, for an abbreviated renewal, confirm of no changes, okay? Please be aware, and I'm going to say this again about the product listings here, that a lot of times folks don't understand that there's a statutory requirement for them to delist. You can't just allow your product listing to lapse or just go untended. You actually have to go in there and tell FDA that you're no longer manufacturing it and say whenever it's being out of distribution. So you're actually going to have to delist it. So put it on your calendar and remember that this is not a one and done thing, and FDA is actually expecting you to keep this information accurate and up to date. The methods that are available for registration and listing information, first and foremost, you have your electronic submission processes, right? So the main one is the Cosmetics Direct portal, which is housed in, it used to just be Cedar Direct, but Cedar Direct and Cosmetics Direct are very similar in the process that's implemented there. And so FDA housed both of these in a new portal that's called FDA Direct. So if you need to list and register your cosmetics, you can do that in Cosmetics Direct, which is in the FDA Direct portal. You also have the option of preparing submissions using X forms, and X forms are basically just templates for building XML files for registration and listing purposes, and then you can submit those by either uploading them into Cosmetics Direct, or you can submit them across the electronic submission gateway, which I believe is soon to be called, or they're soon to update that to more user-friendly electronic submission gateway next gen, so look out for that. There's also third-party customized software out there, although it usually costs quite a bit, but some of the larger companies will probably have that as their option. And then there are conversion vendors, consultants such as myself and Sudareg, where we will use any number of these options to be able to help you. We can train you, we can do it on your behalf and be the authorized agent to submit your registrations and listings if necessary. It's however you really want to do it, but Sudareg is a conversion vendor and we do that for our clients. And obviously the other method that's available, you still have FDA making this available, although it's not recommended. You have paper submissions, FDA Form 5066 and FDA Form 5067. Both go in through the mail, and you need to be aware that if they go in through the mail, the receipt date for a paper submission is the date on which the submission arrived at the FDA. So you need to be aware of that if your manufacturing processes need to be coordinated, and you need to let FDA know by a certain date that you're manufacturing. You may need to send it in by a certain time. You may have to expedite it. You may want to get receiver, all of that stuff. So it's important, and it is an option for you. But I want to point out that FDA strongly encourages electronic submissions to facilitate the efficiency and timeliness of data submission and management for the agency. All of this is done in SPL, which is structured content, and structured content can be read and to some extent analyzed and collated by electronic measures, and that really helps the agency be able to review and tend to all of this. So we'll talk about contract manufacturers a little bit. Remember from the definitions that a contract manufacturer manufactures or processes cosmetic products on behalf of a responsible person. They're also referred to, many people heard this before, the CMO facility. It's a contract manufacturing organization. I want CMOs to be aware that a single registration is required for a CMO facility, even if the facility is manufacturing under both their own label and many different clients' labels. Still just one single registration is required. So a responsible person whose products are manufactured or processed at a CMO facility may submit the facility registration for such a facility. So CMOs, please be aware, in this circumstance, this means that someone else can register your facility with the FDA if you're manufacturing their cosmetics. You want to manage this process within your quality agreement. That's not required, but it's definitely recommended. And I'm going to say and point out here that there's a helpful document out there that FDA released. It's in the drug regulation side of things, but it's for establishing a solid quality agreement. This was distributed in November of 2016. It's titled Contract Manufacturing Arrangements for Drugs Quality Agreements. And many of the recommendations in this guidance will be helpful in the cosmetic space as well. So take a look at that guidance for the purposes of establishing solid quality agreements in the cosmetic space if you're a contract manufacturer or you're using a cosmetic manufacturer for the manufacturing of your product. So I want you to be aware that there's corresponding information in the registrations and the listings. And this goes for owners, operators, responsible persons, and CMOs, okay? So submitting the brand names and brand owners for all the products manufactured and processed at a facility is part of the registration process of the facility. Meanwhile, submitting the facility registration number is part of the cosmetic product listing. The FDA can or may review your registration and reconcile the brand names in the registration against submitted listings. I'm going to repeat here. This is important. You want to manage this process within your quality agreement. It's not required, but it's recommended. Okay, the registration and listing process needs to be managed within your quality agreement. And a quality agreement containing provisions to properly manage and control FDA registration and listing is one way that you can protect your operation as a CMO or the client of a CMO. Again, corresponding info in the registration and listing. So FDA may review listings associated with your facility and reconcile them against the brand names in your registration. The registration and listing process, even and especially for contract manufacturing arrangements, they're tied together and need to be coordinated. I think I've said this, but I'm going to repeat it one last time. Manage this process within your quality agreement. It's not required, but it's definitely recommended. The critical item in your quality agreement is to have in place documentation that shows that you're allocating the responsibility to list, update, renew, all of that, the product listings, and also clear assignment of duties related to the other provisions of applicable regulations along with everything else in MoCRA. So why am I hammering on the registration and listing needing to be tightly managed under a quality agreement that's been, reviewed over and over again? Well, it's because the facility registration can be suspended, and the authority given to suspend the registration, the authority given to FDA is rather broad. In Section 607 of MoCRA, the bill addresses reasons why a manufacturer's registration can be suspended. But the registration of a facility can be suspended if a cosmetic product manufactured or processed by the facility and distributed in the United States has a reasonable probability of causing serious adverse health consequences or death to humans. Other products manufactured or processed by the facility may similarly be impacted because of failure that cannot be isolated to a product or group of products, so not to a batch or lot, or if the failure is sufficiently pervasive to raise concerns about other products manufactured in the facility. So things like water quality from your water system. All of these can play parts in the suspension of registration. And additionally, I would want to point out that each element of MoCRA, which includes the registration and listing, the adverse event reporting, cosmetic product safety substantiation, labeling, records, mandatory recalls, and GMP. Obviously, the registration and listing is important, but any of these elements, if they're not addressed adequately, could create the reasonable probability of causing serious adverse health consequences or death to humans. And then MoCRA provides that FDA can suspend the facility registration. And why does facility registration suspension matter? Well, if the registration of the facility is suspended, introduction or delivery for introduction into commerce in the United States of a cosmetic product from that facility is prohibited. And I'll say it again. If the registration of the facility is suspended, introduction or delivery for introduction into commerce in the United States of a cosmetic product from that facility is prohibited. So what I'm saying is you could get put out of operation. And we don't want the manufacture or distribution of your products to be prohibited, so we want to take positive action to avoid these circumstances, right? So one positive action, and in fact the starting point for MoCRA compliance, is the safety substantiation of the cosmetic product. It says keep calm and substantiate, right? So one of the primary means of establishing that a cosmetic product is safe is the safety substantiation. Specifically, the responsible person must ensure that products are compliant with MoCRA before being released by the quality control unit, and that there's adequate substantiation of each cosmetic product, and there's supporting records and documentations created, collected, and maintained about that safety substantiation. So what are they talking about when they say adequate substantiation of safety? Well, that means tests or studies or research, analyses, or other evidence of it or information considered among experts qualified by scientific training and experience to evaluate the safety of cosmetic products and their ingredients, sufficient to support a reasonable certainty that a cosmetic product is safe. Now that can be RIPT studies, that can be, repeat insult patch testing, it can be GMP records, it can be all sorts of tests and analyses, whether that be chemistry or micro. That's why we're saying that the safety substantiation is really the initial step or the beginning of MoCRA compliance. It's absolutely a vital part of the work to prepare for MoCRA compliance, as well as the submission of cosmetic facility registration and product listing information to FDA, which in my estimation would be the final step. So keep calm and substantiate. And then the final point that I'd like to make is that managing the labeling, registration, and the cosmetic product listing information is of paramount importance. It's one of the other primary means of establishing that a cosmetic product is safe by managing the labeling materials, registration, and listing for content and compliance. You have to remember that there's specific labeling content required for cosmetics, and the manufacturer and the responsible person should check, recheck, and verify that the product labeling, promotional material, language, and advertising and listing information, you have to make sure that all of that is correct and compliant. And I'm going to say it one last time. You want to manage all these processes within your quality agreement. It's not required, but we definitely recommend it. So please reach out if you need help with your quality agreements. I want to thank you for your time and wish you good luck with your MoCRA compliance efforts. If you need support, please reach out to myself or any of my colleagues at SudaReg. You can reach John Mysock at that email address, or you can reach me, Ken Stevenson. There's my email address. Thanks again. Take care.